You are listening to Level Up Gaming Podcast, episode 122, Post Apocalyptic Games. In today's episode, Josh and I discuss how to run a post-apocalyptic game. This was a listener-asked topic about their World of Darkness games. We discuss what types of tropes fit and how to build a post-apocalyptic game. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode.
Bow, 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 bow. Level Up Your Gaming Podcast.
Welcome into the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually once again, Josh. How you doing today, Josh?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I wish I had more updates in general for the podcast and stuff. I've got some more stuff coming for the podcast. We actually finally got back in touch with the DMD, or I did, and we're going to do some sort of live play thing with them at some point and hopefully put that out. So I will keep you updated on that. But aside from that, I don't think there's very much else going on with me.
Sounds exciting, though. I mean, that sounds like a fun time.
So we're going to do another listener suggested topic here today, which is great. Again, I think I mentioned in the last episode that Mike sent all these emails to me. And again, Mike, love it. Really appreciate it. Love all the engagement. I got content out the wazoo. So one of your questions was, it was sort of a two-part question, but the piece that I'm going to take away from it that I'm going to talk about right now is the post-apocalyptic game. And specifically because you play Werewolf the Apocalypse, it's right there in the title that you're leading the game. If you've never played Werewolf the Apocalypse or one of the World of Darkness games, all of their stories in the World of Darkness are pre-apocalyptic. The apocalypse is going to happen. Okay, the vampires call it Gehenna. The mages call it the Ascension. Werewolves call it the Apocalypse. But basically, you're all fighting against the same thing, which is the end of the world is coming. And so the natural thing I think a lot of people gravitate to in the apocalypse setting is what happens after the apocalypse, the post-apocalyptic game. And the short, the too long didn't read, is that they basically boil down to this. If you destroy the world, the game that you are going to build after that is going to be a rebuilding survival game. Okay? That's always how it ends up working out. Okay? Look at The Walking Dead. Look, okay? Look at, there's that History Channel one called The Colony. It was more like I don't know if you ever saw this, but there's a History Channel show called, I think it was called The Colony, which was like, what would it be like if the world ended? And then this group of people kind of came together and did that. And so, like, it's them rebuilding the things they need to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. It was sort of kind of a reality, non-reality show. The first season was set in Los Angeles somewhere, and they basically put them in sort of like kind of isolation from the world for a bit to kind of get them in the mode of this is what it would be like the world has ended. And then the group kind of came together, and there was, building of trust, securing a place to live, security, fire, water, all the basic survival things. And this is what a post-apocalyptic game tends to be. If you're doing it right after the apocalypse, you gave me a look, Josh, that was like, I totally disagree. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so when I think post-apocalypse, if you're talking about, the big battle to end all battles, wipe the planet clean, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, there could be, it could be a survivalist sort of DayZ sort of, Walking Dead situation where you're scrounging for resources and it's basically Fallout. But it doesn't have to be. The apocalypse could be, and this is entirely dependent on how you want to write your apocalypse. If this is your game, right? You are writing your story. How did your apocalypse end? How did your apocalypse happen? What was involved in your apocalypse? And then the second part of that is, how much after the apocalypse is your game? Is it directly after?
That's a good point.
Is it, like it? We talk about Fallout because I pulled up a list of doomsday TV shows, and I was thinking about doomsday video games, sort of give myself the mindset of the post-apocalyptic feel. You talk about Fallout happens either Fallout 76. We don't talk about Fallout 76. Most of the games happen, a couple hundred years afterwards. And yes, there is some rebuilding, but that's because things have gone bad in that interim. Other post-apocalypse, I'm looking here, you get like Y, The Last Man. Okay, that whole comic book series where the one guy was on the space station or on a space trip, or he was in space, and all the men on Earth died. Okay, it was a bad time. That is an apocalypse, but the infrastructure hasn't gone away. People still exist. Things are going bad because people are trying to fill in the gaps, and there's a whole situation going on. And that sort of thing in a mage game would be really interesting. You have, you may have a small group of people that had gotten cloistered or sent off into some sort of pocket universe for a short period of time while the apocalypse happened and wiped out all magic, all connection to the magics, right? And you get back and you're the only people that have it, and everybody else is sort of dealing with a world that doesn't have it anymore, but still has all the same troubles. That's an apocalypse. It's not the same sort of the world has ended apocalypse, but it is an apocalypse.
I guess my mind drives towards the world has ended apocalypse because it is the apocalypse noted in the World of Darkness, which is the world has ended apocalypse.
Yeah. Okay. And that's, in what way has the world ended is what I'm saying. Is like, are all the nations of vampire and werewolf destroyed and there's only hunters left? Or is like, who survived? What infrastructure is still around? And these sort of things you need to sort of plan out. I'm thinking, what was that show? V. Was it V? Where they've got the aliens that come to Earth, and it's like from beforehand to now, it's a completely different situation because you've introduced this thing. It's not necessarily an apocalypse in the same style, but you could also have like Falling Skies, where you've already lost the war and are sort of surviving against an ongoing foe. Demons have invaded. You've lost the apocalypse. Demons are everywhere, and now you're dealing with that. It's
so you see in that apocalypse world, there you're still working heavy on the survival themes. I think that you are right that you could do in a post-apocalyptic game, but you have to do it like set way after the apocalypse, where some version of order has sort of been established that you can sort of set up within your game. So like the Fallout one is probably a pretty good example of it, because you actually have some world that exists that isn't just like, we're still trying to figure out, we have this tribe of people over here that we keep fighting every other day. Like, and these damn bandits keep coming by every week. We're just trying our best right now.
I'm just trying to make some sweet potatoes grow, man. I just want my sweet potatoes. No. Yeah, I think determining what apocalypse you want, what level of infrastructure is left, figuring out how far past the actual event it is, who's still around. You can have a lot of fun with it. You can have a lot of fun making an apocalypse, a post-apocalypse situation, and it doesn't all have to be, wander around picking up cans so that you can have enough cans to trade at the
Can
for for scraps of meat. Yeah, there's
again, unless you really dig the bartering aspect of it. That's again, tone of your game. What do you want to establish? Do you want to have a very heavy survival game? Because a post-apocalyptic world is a great place for it. It's an excellent place to do it because everything is bartering. How do you survive the wilderness that is probably now harsher than it was before? Are you trying to establish a home base? The thing with a post-apocalyptic game that is survival based is that building a story into it is generally pretty hard because this is more of a sandboxy type of thing. You have to have very motivated players to move through that. Now, maybe if you really want to put together a story and your players are more of a follow the story type group, you could do the post-apocalyptic game that has the survival aspects of it, but you have people leading, I guess, the survivors. And then you are more, go fight off these bandits, go do this, go do that. Like, you're more of a foot soldiers in that regard. But I think that even in that case, your players still need to have heavy motivations in the game because the game otherwise becomes quite boring at some point, which is you're just kind of doing a bunch of chores to keep the colony afloat. Your players are probably not going to like what leadership does, and you're going to have to create some pretty clever stories around, what is going on between these groups and, conflicts and strife and things like that. So
you could end up running to the same problem The Walking Dead ran into, is that the first couple of seasons or, sessions, they're very interesting. You've got a plan, you got a plot, you know what you're doing, and then you get to the prison, and then you do the same thing you did at the farmhouse. So you get to the town, and you do the same thing you did at the farm, and you just keep repeating the storyline. What might be a good idea if you want to have that sort of game is go back and look at how other people did it. Dark Sun is a great post-apocalyptic setting that D&D put out, second edition? Was there a fourth edition or was it just second edition? I don't think they did 3 or 3.5.
I don't know.
It's ages ago, but they had Dark Sun was a really nice post-apocalyptic desert world. There's a bunch of different factions, people doing things. If you want to have that sort of survival aspect, don't fall into the same setting of, you're just trying to keep your base together and then somebody raids your base and now you're going to need a new base. Find a way to sort of build beyond that. Give them hope, make something new.
I guess that's a good point. You really do need to have something that the players could aspire to that generates your new hope in the world, potentially. Maybe there's a way to repopulate, the werewolf nation in that. Or maybe there's a way to undo the miasma that has been beset upon the world, by the you have to have some bigger goal that the players can eventually work towards. Ken ran us a game ages ago about I think it was a post-apocalyptic game in a vampire setting, and one of his favorite stories surrounding like Mikaboshi, which is like a demon king that kind of enslaves the Tremere. vampires, and there wasn't ever any like way out of the situation in the game. So it was just like yeah, you're just like under his boot the whole time. Like we tried to like ingratiate ourselves to him, and like we tried a bunch of different things to do, but like there was no end to the problem, which was, you know, you're fighting this new bandit lord. You've got Negan, whoever it is in your world, and you know you're trying to get out from underneath that, or you're trying to build something new or undo part of the problem that has arisen through the apocalypse itself. So, like, again, you talked about you lost the apocalypse, you got demons have invaded your world. Well, the obvious answer to that is that you can somehow rid the world of the demons. You know, in order to get to the players have some goal that they could achieve. Like that might be your big ultimate goal, and that's the story there. And I think that you have to have something akin to that in your post-apocalyptic world. Otherwise, it really is player-driven, and you're just building it's base building simulator, recruitment, bartering simulator. And you can have cool stories in that. Don't get me wrong. You can have really cool if you have players who are driven to do their own thing. That is a very open world aspect. If you have players that like sandbox games, that is where you can let your motivations run wild, because the players can really be like, I want to do this, and I want to become king of this new world that we have set up here, and we're gonna create this whole, you know,
King of Bartertown.
Yeah, King of Bartertown, whatever it might be. So again, I think you have to have think about how you're going to end the shit that you're going through in the apocalypse. Like that's really important.
No, you could take it. I think they did this really well in the first couple of Fallout games. You know, you had in the first game, they wanted to get the water chip, so you go on a mission, you find a town, blah 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 blah. So there's like a series of events that sort of introduces you to a post-apocalyptic world, and it leads to there are people out there trying to destroy what's left, and you have to sort of work against that. And even as recent as Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 were doing the same sort of thing. But when you just have that same sort of base building thing that was going on in Fallout 4, the game gets really slow and boring. So if you're going to be making that, introduce something that's going to the players can fight against and win and have some sort of goal to achieve. Another post-apocalyptic game that I've been playing was the Horizon games. Aaron, have you played these Horizon games?
I played some of Horizon Zero Dawn. Mm-hmm. I never finished it, but you know, everyone said it's really good.
But if it's not yours, it's not. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I mean, that's one of the things you've been saying in this channel the whole time is that the game that you play, the game that you run, should be the game that you enjoy running or playing. Yeah. And a game that you play on a console, it should be no different. If you don't enjoy it, don't keep playing it because everybody's telling you to. But look at it for inspiration, maybe. And what that game did for Post-Apocalypse was that it set 100,000 years after the apocalypse, and the same things that caused the apocalypse the first time are sort of coming back. And you know, whatever sort of meager life people have eked out in this what's left is now being challenged, and that is a fun way to give your players something to do. They have to go and make sure that the apocalypse doesn't happen again, destroying everything that people have built up. And, you know, but now they don't have nearly the resources they did the first time.
Yeah, I guess that is a way that you could do it, which is that your one of your win conditions to the apocalypse game would be that you are trying to prevent another apocalypse, or you're trying to prevent whoever's enforcing the current conditions within the apocalypse from perpetuating the same conditions, I suppose. And you're right. This is a real big part where I would honestly say KYP and really, really know your players for this, because they have to be ready to be more of an active participant in your post-apocalyptic game. I would definitely say that this is the type of game that any player really needs to have more motivations within the game, and you should establish that in session 0 or even in your elevator pitch for the game, because you're going to have a heck of a time otherwise kind of working this out. And these are hard games to do as well, because if you look at Horizon Zero Dawn as your example there, although it is backdropped over like America, right? It's like Los Angeles area.
Colorado-ish, I think.
Colorado,
for the first game. Yeah. LA for the second game.
Yeah, so it's backdropped over that area, but you're still effectively you're creating. I mean, it's like going the D&D route, but you're creating the entire D&D world yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're creating the fiefdom of Hoogaloo or whatever it might be, and they and you've got these guys over here, and you're running errands between the two of them, and they're very challenging games in that regard, that you have a lot of world building to do to establish those settings. It's much harder. I guess it would be easier to do one of your something happened and something's vastly different in the world that we know today, but it's still the world we know today for the most part. Kind of apocalypse. But I don't think that's when people think apocalypse games, I generally don't think in that in that term.
No. It can be an apocalypse, but you have to establish it. A vastly different world that looks the same as it currently does, but like something horrible has happened, is a type of apocalypse. But it's probably not the one you're thinking of when you say that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are hard things to deal with the post-apocalyptic game, and there's a whole different set of rules. You're not bound by laws that exist today. So again, you're trying to establish that within your players, and again, that's why I said that it's going to be heavily dependent upon player motivations to get things moving in a post-apocalyptic world. Because unless they are below a group of people and you have a bigger story going on there, I'm trying to think of like, how would I do a good werewolf game in a post-apocalyptic world or something like that, which is kind of where this subject came about. And one of the things I could think of would be like, well, you have the post-apocalyptic creatures still roaming the earth. Is there a way to reseal the worm? Now that it's broken free and caused havoc, like those are things that bring hope and light to the next world that your players can work through in this. Again, it's still sort of the same fight that you had in the pre-apocalyptic game as you led up to the apocalypse, but it is the fight now is slightly different in that you are encountering more of the villainy that exists in the world around you. So it's a very interesting, like you can tell some very interesting stories, but you have to have players that are, again, really heavily driven to go do their own thing in that world as well. I don't know. It's a conundrum of a problem.
I think everybody wants to be the guy that stops the apocalypse, but nobody wants to be the guy that rebuilds after it. I mean, you get those people that they build their bunkers and they've got, their stores of MREs and, barrels of rainwater sitting in their backyards, but they don't want the apocalypse to happen. They're just worried that it might. So the game is sort of the same style here, is that a lot of these games are, um, especially all the World of Darkness stuff, they've got all that pre-apocalypse, this is happening sort of thing. Or it's currently happening. This is the apocalypse. You're in the apocalypse. Apocalypse crap is happening right now. But afterwards, oh, that's like, cleaning up after the biggest party you've ever seen. It's a mess. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody feels good when it's happening. It's just a bad time.
Again, you try and push yourself far enough past the initial point. That's why I said an initial right after an apocalypse game is probably a lot of world rebuilding stuff. You look at something like the Forgotten World setting, which is that would be a very kind of, again, you have to be really the type of player that really wants to play kind of that hex crawl there in that world, but it's heavily based upon survival, and the roles are heavily based upon survival. But it is like a post-apocalyptic game, which is that the world is shut down from one another because there is a miasma that blankets the world, and just recently people have been able to move about in the real world at great peril, and that would be an example of a post-apocalyptic game, or a setting that you could use for a post-apocalyptic game, which is that you're trying to rediscover and reestablish things in the world and move past situations. If you wanted to do a later werewolf game, you could be descendants of werewolves that survived the apocalypse, and you could do something akin to now werewolves are even further, sparse, and you probably don't run into very many werewolves at all. So the fact that you were able to form a pack at all would mean that maybe you have the setting, or the enough people to start rebuilding a werewolf nation, or maybe you run into a group of werewolves and that is it. That's the resistance. That's the end of kind of everything that you're working towards. Again, this, you could apply that in space terms too. I mean, you could even go fantasy, the Star Wars setting, which is, A New Hope is effectively a post-apocalyptic game.
The Empire has won. Everybody's screwed. Yeah, no, but with I absolutely agree with you that any sort of post-apocalyptic world that you're going to create as a DM is going to be a lot of world building. And if you wanted to do, there's all sorts of different ways you could go about it. You could have it so that, let's go with your werewolf game. You're playing World of Darkness, you're playing werewolf. You've got descendants of your group have, are forming a pack, and you're heading out into the world to see what things are. You've been cloistered away for a long period of time. And now you're back into the world because it's finally starting to get, so that people can still survive out in the world. And you run into other packs, but they are wildly different. And, maybe that's the game that you're playing, is that the werewolves you encounter don't look like the werewolves that and now you've got wars between different clans and nations, and you've got these post-apocalyptic beasts you got to fight. But this is all the sort of world building that you need to pre-establish and sort of build, what communities are going to be where, what's your world going to look like, who are the different factions that are going to be involved, what's the main story, what are you going for. And there's a lot of pre-build. There's a lot of session zero to make sure that your characters have goals that you're going to be able to, bring into the game, or that they can, follow along with, that actually make sense in the world that you've created. And it's a lot of work, but it could be a lot of fun. Just an incredible amount of fun, because you're doing everything from scratch. It's not, you're not playing with somebody else's world at this point. You are really, really playing your own world.
To kind of piggyback on what you just said there with, talking about the werewolf world, and something that you could do is, because werewolves were going extinct up into the apocalypse in the source material, perhaps the event of the apocalypse was sort of that magical reawakening where the werewolf gene becomes stronger, and so there are more werewolves in the world. They are just unorganized and unprepared, which would then give you a very unique story, which is how do you reunite this and then fight, your ultimate evil. Again, you have to have a goal established in any post-apocalyptic world. I don't know what the goal was in the Dark Suns setting, whatever you.
Oh, the D&D Dark Sun stuff. Yeah. I would have to go back. It's been ages since I've played that, and most of that storyline was a bunch of different factions were going after each other. I'd have to go back through it. Only because we were talking about this spurred my recollection of the subject. I have to go back and take a look at it now, because there's like a little bit that's like, remember this? It was a good time.
Again, you could do something with it, but you just have to really have a well-defined goal for your players to be able to achieve. Like, what is the win? I've talked about this. Jared and I have talked about it constantly about like your long campaign. You're fighting a big bad necromancer or something like that in D&D. Well, what happens when the necromancer wins and destroys the world? Okay. Like, how do you
everything's gone terribly wrong.
Everything's gone wrong. You didn't defeat the necromancer. And it did raise the army of the dead. So now what do you do?
That person has ascended to godhood, and they are now a dark god of death and destruction, and they rain it down from their castle on high, and cities have been laid to waste. And what? Is this a new apocalypse? Is this, post-apocalypse? This is all the sort of world building that you need to pre-establish, but you get to have fun with it.
Yeah, if you are the type of GM that likes to world build, this is a good, a good way for you to do that, because this is you are no longer restricted to any source material. You can use source material to help inform decisions here. And believe me, if you do a post-apocalyptic world and you build your own world, sort of, and again, that you may get too lofty with this, but one of the fun things you can do is you can go back to existing source material and you can show the remnants of like this once great city or something like that, or twist it, and you can do fun things with that, those different settings as well. Establish it with your players. Session 0. You guys ready to be, very involved in this? And this is the world, and this is, make sure that this is something they want to do, because it's not for every player group. It's know
your players. Yeah, absolutely. You have to have a game that's like, it should be fun. People should enjoy playing it. Do not do I have no mouth, yet I must scream, because nobody's going to enjoy the game at the end. You're all going to be sitting around just like mad at you. So find a game, find a setting that works, find a story that works. But if you want to have fun with a post-apocalyptic world, you can really go for it. And there's a lot of fun things you can do with it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I'm going to kind of keep re-hitting the same point. Mm-hmm. So
yep. We're going to hit the same stuff over and over at this point.
Do you have anything else you want to add to this then, Josh?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. Good luck.
Yes, good luck with it. I'm happy to answer more questions for it. But again, if anybody has done a post-apocalyptic setting, and I guess you feel like you've done it well, it's kind of a subjective thing there. But if you have any tips on how to run in a post-apocalyptic setting, levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. You can also find us on YouTube, comment us on there, like the podcast, all that other good stuff. And, go ahead and review the podcast, subscribe, recommend to a friend, all those other good things that keep the podcast moving throughout the world, and all that other, and just keep doing that. That's helping. I feel like I keep saying and all that other good stuff too much. But anyways, that's going to wrap us up for the week. So For Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Gaming podcast. Level it up.